Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start today's discussion by taking up the important articles which feature in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. And since we missed yesterday's session, we'll also take an important article from the yesterday's newspaper. So let's start our discussion by taking the first article. The first article which appears in the newspaper reads, "The new hybrid variant of mustard." Now, this article appears in the newspaper in the backdrop of the genetically modified mustard crop. So, if I ask all of you what comes into your mind when you look at these yellow crop farms, most of you would be flashing this image. But we're not here to analyze these two characters, but the backdrop in which this movie was shot and made the Sarson ke Khet immemorable. Yes, so the topic of our discussion today is the mustard plant, where UPSC has already asked question on the GM mustard in the year 2018. So UPSC has been way ahead of its time, and we see that in a lot of cases. So what has happened now? What the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, which is the apex committee in India with respect to the genetically modified plants and crops, this has approved the environmental release of the Dhara Mustard Hybrid 11 or DMH11, a genetically engineered variant of the mustard crop. If approved for commercial cultivation, it would be the first genetically modified food crop available to Indian farmers. So that is why the news of genetically modified mustard crop coming into the market is a very significant news, because this would be, if approved, there are certain steps yet remaining for the genetically modified crop to be coming into the market. So once approved, it would be the first crop to be a genetically modified crop that would be grown by Indian farmers. So that is why it becomes important for us to understand what exactly is this GM mustard or genetically modified mustard, how exactly was it prepared, who prepared it, what were the things that went with it, what is the role of Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee in it, what were some of the concerns that were raised by the protest groups who were protesting with respect to this particular crop, and what remains as what are the steps ahead which would make this crop a reality in the Indian market. So let's start by understanding this body first as to what is this Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee which is approved. So the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee has approved the GM mustard for an environmental release. What we mean by environmental release, it means that the committee has approved the crop for seed production, and further scientific studies would happen before the commercial cultivation of the crop takes place. And that is why this body becomes important for us to understand from the examination point of view. So the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee is actually a statutory body notified under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. It was formed as the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee and later was renamed to its current name. And it functions under the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. What does this body do? It regulates the use, manufacture, storage, import and export of the hazardous microorganisms or genetically engineered organisms and cells in India. So this is the ambit of the function that this regulatory body functions under. So now let's come to what mustard, the crop mustard. Now, whenever we talk about mustard, why is there a need to genetically modify this mustard crop? So let's first understand about mustard as a crop. So when we talk about mustard as a crop, it is the second most significant and well-known winter oilseed crop in India. So mustard is a crop which is essentially grown in the Rabi season or in the winter season majorly in the northern parts of India, but sometimes in other parts of India as well. But the prominent regions of growing mustard are in the northern parts of India, and therefore it is a major crop which is known as an oilseed crop. So therefore oil is extracted from mustard and it fulfills the need of edible oils in our country. But we know that India is a major consumer of edible oils, and a lot of percentage of edible oils in our country is imported from other countries. So India produces only 8.5 to 9 million tons of edible oil annually, while importing around 14 to 14.5 million tons of edible oil from other countries. So obviously a lot of foreign exchange is spent for on this, as high as 18.9 or 19 billion in the fiscal year ending from March 31 to 2022. So last year around $20 billion were spent to import edible oil, and that is why this is a pressing need for us to lessen our import bill and make sure that there are other alternatives, domestic alternatives, which we can adopt and increase our edible oil production. And here is where the role of genetically modified mustard comes in, wherein by modifying the genes of the mustard crop and preparing a variety which gives high yield can give out more oil and hence help in decreasing our import bill. So in this backdrop, let's understand about the genetically modified mustard and how exactly was this crop produced. So when we talk about the genetically modified mustard, what exactly is this GM mustard? When we talk about the genetically modified plants, what this means is that two different varieties of the plants are being taken and mixed together to prepare a third variety which purportedly gives higher yields. It is known as the process of hybridization, which involves crossing two genetically dissimilar plant varieties that can even be from the same species. So the key word is that they should be genetically dissimilar. So the first generation offspring from such crosses tend to have higher yields than what either parent can individually give. That is why these two varieties are mixed together. And in particular with the mustard crop, such hybridization isn't easy. Why? Because the mustard as a crop, its flowers have both the female and male reproductive organs, which makes it self-sufficient to reproduce within itself. Therefore, the plants largely are self-pollinating, and therefore the process of making a hybrid version of mustard crop was essentially difficult. So therefore, since the eggs of one plant cannot be fertilized by the pollen grains from another, it limits the scope for developing hybrids. So this was the initial challenge with respect to modifying the mustard crop. But how was it achieved? So this has been done by the genetic modification technique. And who did it? Scientists at the Delhi University Center for Genetic Manipulation of Crop Plants have developed the hybrid mustard DMH11. Now when we say DMH11, this is known as Dhara Mustard Hybrid 11, and 11 signifies the number of iterations that the modifications had to go through. So it means that this is the 11th version of the plant variety which gave out the best yield, hence the name DMH11. It contains two alien genes isolated from a soil bacterium called Bacillus amyloquefaciens. And the first gene which is taken to mix is known as the Barnase gene, which codes for a protein that impairs pollen production and renders the plant into which it is incorporated male sterile. So this is the first gene that is taken, and it is taken from one plant, and the another plant is giving the second gene is crossed with a fertile parental line containing the second Barstar gene. So one is the Barnase gene and another is the Barstar gene that blocks the action of the Barnase gene. The resultant F1 progeny is both high yielding and also capable of producing seed or grain thanks to the Barstar gene in the second fertile line. It is said that the GM mustard will have as high as 30% more yield capacity than the normal mustard seed. So how did the researchers achieve this? The scientists deployed the Barstar technology to create what they say is a robust and viable hybridization system in mustard. So where did they take these genes from? The system was used to develop the DMH11 by crossing a popular Indian mustard variety known as Varuna, from which they took the Barnase gene, with an East European variety of mustard which is known as early Hera 2, and mixed the two particular genes, and this resulted into the DMH11. So this is the story as to how the Delhi University Center created the GM mustard crop. Now this crop was created way earlier, and the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee had also approved this, but the Union Ministry did not approve it and had vetoed it, and there were certain protests with respect to the coming of this crop as well. So what has the GAC done now? The GAC has recommended the environmental release, as I mentioned, of the DMH11 for its seed production and testing prior to its commercial release. So this is an important point which we need to make note of, that what is the current stage of the GM mustard is that the GAC has cleared it for environmental release, which would make possible for its further testing in some fields and its seed production, so that we get to know more how this plant behaves, is it safe or not for the fields and other stuff. But after that, it would be ready for the commercial release. So in other words, it has given the green signal for commercial cultivation by farmers, with production of seed material being the first step. So this move was earlier vetoed in 2016 by the Environment Ministry, and even now the same stage is set where the ball is in the court of the Union Ministry, which would approve this move, right? So what are the concerns then which were raised by the various protest groups? There were various protests happening with respect to bringing the GM mustard crop into the market. What were these protests? These protest groups said that the presence of a third bar gene, which makes GM mustard plants tolerant to the spraying of glufosinate ammonium, a chemical used for killing weeds. So it was said that when we make a genetically modified crop, it has certain genes which would not make the requirement of spraying a particular pesticide on or a weedicide to kill the weeds. This is supposed to be an advantage of the GM crop, but the opponents alleged that it will cause displacement of the manual labor engaged in weeding by promoting use of chemical herbicides. This was what the opposition was. And the second issue was that this GM mustard can threaten or undermine the population of honeybees, because the mustard flowers are a source of nectar for honeybees and many other pollinator insects. And it was said that the GM mustard might hamper this. It might disrupt the process of collecting nectar by the bees from these crops, but this has now been cleared by the government that it is safe for the bees as well. So this was the discussion which we undertook with respect to what is the case really regarding the GM mustard, how was it brought into the reality, and what is the current status of it right now. So with this we finish the article, and let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "Decline in pre-primary enrollments continued in 2021-2022, says government report." Now this particular article pertains to the sector of education and highlights a report taken out by the Ministry of Education, which is known as the Unified District Information System for Education Plus report on school education. So this is a unique report which measures the gross enrollment ratio, or the number of students who are going to school, who are going to all these grades in the school. So this is a very vital statistics which can come to our use if we encounter any question in the mains examination or otherwise, because this is the data provided by the government itself. So what does it say primarily? The first data which it highlights is that enrollment in primary classes, which include classes 1 to 5, also saw a drop for the first time, falling from 12.22 lakh in 2021 to 12.18 lakh in 2021-2022. So basically this report tries to measure the enrollment ratio in various grades, in the pre-primary level, in the primary level, and in the secondary and higher secondary level. So what do we mean by gross enrollment ratio then? This is the ratio of the number of students who live in that country to those who qualify for the particular grade level, which means that the total number of students who are qualified to go at a certain grade level, how much of them are really being enrolled in the school. That gives us the gross enrollment ratio. So before getting to the highlights of the report, let's understand what this Unified District Information System or for Education Plus is, or which is shortly called UDISC Plus. This UDISC Plus system is for online data collection from the schools, was developed by the Department of School Education and Literacy, which again comes under the Ministry of Education, in the year 2018 to 19 to overcome the issues related to erstwhile practice of manual data filling in paper format. So this system was brought to take the manual format into the online format, and this system improvements have been made particularly in the areas related to data capture, data mapping and data verification. And this time additional data on important indicators such as the digital library, peer learning, hard spot identification, number of books available in the library have been collected for the first time to align with the national education policy initiatives. So this is about the Unified District Information System for Education Plus, which comes under the Ministry of Education. So now what does this report highlight? The report highlights that the gross enrollment ratio has actually decreased for the pre-primary level. So when we talk about students below the classes 1, the nursery or lower kindergarten students, there the gross enrollment ratio has decreased. But in other areas such as the primary level or the secondary level, the gross enrollment ratio has actually improved. And this becomes significant because the education sector is facing a new lease of life after the COVID pandemic, and therefore there are various new challenges that the sector is facing, as well as it is grappling from new realities. So according to the report, the gross enrollment ratio has improved at primary, upper primary and higher secondary levels of school education in the year 2021 to 2022 as compared to the last year. So the gross enrollment ratio in the higher secondary level made significant improvement from 53.8% to 57.6% in this year. And the pupil teacher ratio, which would mean that for the number of students, how many number of teachers are available. So this stood at 26 for the primary, 19 for the upper primary and 18 for secondary and 27 for higher secondary, showing an improvement since the past 2 years. Similarly, the number of girls who have also enrolled in the primary to higher secondary level have increased, but the dismal figure is about the shutting of schools. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, what has happened is that more than 20,000 schools were closed across the country during 2021, while the number of teachers also declined by 2% in the comparison to the previous year. And not just this, it pointed out that only 44% of the schools had computer facilities, while nearly 34% had internet connection. So these are some of the vital data points which this report collects, which we can make use of in our mains answers. So this was the discussion with respect to this article, and with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, 7 toppers in the latest index on school education. So again, this article talks of the education sector, but this is about a index prepared by the Ministry of Education, which is known as the Performance Grading Index. This is a unique index for evidence-based comprehensive analysis of school education systems across the states. And its prime objective of the Performance Grading Index is to promote evidence-based policy making and highlight course correction to ensure quality education for all. And what does the index say? It places a total 7 states such as Kerala, Punjab, Chandigarh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. These 7 states have attained level 2 grading. So these are the 7 top performing states under this index. And states such as Gujarat, Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh are the new entrants. And the UT of Ladakh has made significant improvements in the index from level 8 to level 4. No state, however, has been able to attain the highest level of L1 so far in this index. So this is with respect to the Performance Grading Index. With this, let's move on to the next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Going Beyond Amur Falcons, Nagaland to Celebrate Avian Diversity and Undertake Census. Now this particular article features in the newspaper, which is also similar to the discussion we undertook in the previous video, where we saw that Manipur had tightened the measures since the Amur falcons were arriving to the region. Similarly, the Amur falcons also arrived in the state of Nagaland, and therefore Nagaland is also called as the falcon capital of the world, because these Amur falcons, who initially reside in the Siberian region of Russia and China, travel close to 22,000 kilometers and reach India and then reach southern parts of Africa. And close to 1 million of the Amur falcons reside in the parts of Nagaland, and therefore this place was accorded the status of the falcon capital of the world. So the Nagaland government is going to undertake the first avian census, or counting the number of birds in the state going beyond the Amur falcon. So it is now giving attention to other avian species as well. It is going to be a 4-day event, because the Toku Among bird count, this is the name of the census exercise, which would take place from 4th November for 4 days, has been timed with the Harvest Toku Among festival of the Lothas community, which is a Naga community. This event is a collaboration among the Vokha District Forest Division, the district in which the birds will be counted, the Divisional Management Unit of the Nagaland Forest Management Project, and Bird Count India, which is an Indian NGO indulging into counting of the birds. So this particular news is important because it signifies how a collective effort between the government machinery, that is the forest divisions, and the NGOs and civil society can be taken together and can result into the conservation of the biodiversity, and secondly, how such initiatives can also raise awareness among the citizens of the state and the country as well. So this was our discussion today with the important articles from the newspaper. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles. Thank you.